We're joined now by Fiona Muldoon, the CEO of FBD. Fiona, thanks for calling in to us. Fiona, Storm Alley caused significant damage here on the grounds of Screggan there over the last 24 hours. A number of tents were very badly damaged. What advice would you give to exhibitors who are now looking to extend their insurance contracts to cover tomorrow, the event for tomorrow? What advice would you give them?
I suppose a couple of things I'd say to that. The first is if they have had any damage to their property, that they immediately notify their insurance company. And of course, we're the insurer for many of the exhibitors, but everybody will have their own insurance cover. They should notify their insurer immediately of any damage to their own property and request an extension of cover. I would not assume that cover will be automatically extended. The exhibitors will need to notify their own insurer to do that. And I suppose just generally around Storm Alley, it's not just Screggan, of course. We have already had quite a few claims from all over the country, particularly the West. It does seem to have hit hard, and the general advice there is to secure any damage so that nothing is free or able to blow away subsequently, to take pictures and to immediately notify your insurer. Your insurer is there for these sorts of events, and any good insurance company like FBD will of course respond fully to those claims, and that's as it should be.
And I suppose Storm Alley coming through the site here at the Ploughing is typical of the year. We have had major weather events, one after another it seems, which again highlights the importance of having all your books in order when it comes to insurance, farm insurance.
It does, and I think it also, there's a few things I'd say about that, is make sure your insured values are correct. So you can have insurance, but you need to have the value of the building or the outbuildings or the machinery. You need to make sure that that is up to date, because in the event of a claim, that will be looked at. The cheapest policy is not always the best policy is the other thing. It's important to look at cover, and increasingly we are having these weather events. We have had Ophelia and Emma last winter. We're already only in September and we've had a storm of some significance. So it is important to keep your cover up to date, and a company like FBD, where you have a direct relationship with somebody locally in your own local area through the branch network, is somebody who can help you. We have some very fine men and women running those branches with good teams of people. So I think it is the case that you should make sure that your cover is up to date, and that in particular your valuations are up to date.
A very important message, particularly as we head into the winter period. Fiona, if I could just bring you back, over the last few months there was an internal investigation at FBD into allegations made against yourself. Recently those allegations were not upheld. Can you offer any comments to us on the details on what happened, or how are you since the conclusion was made?
So it was an investigation that was undertaken externally. There were internal allegations, but we went through a very thorough investigation by an independent outsider, and those allegations weren't upheld, as you say. And I suppose it hasn't been an easy time for any of us, and I'm just very glad in terms of how I am. It wasn't easy on anybody. Our policies are there for everybody, including me, and they apply to everybody, including me. And I am glad we're out the end of it, and I'm glad we're focused on our competitors and on our business, and back to, I suppose, some kind of normal. And that's really all there is to be said about it. You know, those sorts of situations are never easy for anyone.
Fiona, in the last year, women in agribusiness, that whole space has really exploded. There's been a lot of emphasis put on women, on encouraging women to really kind of persevere within the agri sector, which we have to face, it is predominantly male. What do you think of that movement that is out there at the moment, that has been gaining momentum, gaining acceleration over the past year or so?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm 31 years in the workforce, and I suppose the changes that I've seen over 31 years are enormous. I actually think that there's a lot of very strong and very able women in the agri sector. I think there's huge opportunity in the agri sector for men and women. So I think that's all to the good from a woman's perspective, and as a mother, I suppose I think it's very important to be strongly supportive of other women. It can sometimes be that you're definitely more visible. So, and as a woman in financial services, as I've spent my career, or in agri, predominantly male dominated, you're often in a situation where you stand out, and that can mean there's more focus on you. It can mean you're judged slightly differently. And of course, women have babies, and that's not going to change either. So the support around those early years in particular, my kids are bigger now, but certainly in those early years, the support that you have at home and from others and from your boss in the workforce is key to keeping people in the workforce through those years where it is very hectic. And the more we can do in that space, I think the more that we will see women progress, because it's those middle years where it really is difficult to balance everything. And if you can keep the women on the pitch, in my experience, there is no reason that they won't rise up in the same way as their male colleagues.
Because Fiona, you would be held up as quite a trailblazer in that space for women, particularly in the agribusiness, on the agribusiness side. What advice would you give to young women of every age, who are trying to climb the ladder, but there are, challenges, gender, pay gaps? What kind of advice would you give them on how to persevere, how to continue going and overcoming those barriers?
So I don't know that any of us are really in a position to give advice to anybody else, and everyone's circumstance is different, of course. But and success is something that people see from a distance. In the meanwhile, you're just busy getting on, doing what you're doing. And certainly that's been always my experience of my career. But I suppose if I had any advice worth hearing, it would be to be resilient and to marry smart. We don't talk to our daughters about that, but to marry a man who sees you as a partner and who will help, because it's really not possible unless there's help on the home front. So I think Caitlin Moran has written a book about that. She wrote a book about How to Be a Woman was the name of the book, but the follow-up book was about what we talk to our daughters about. And I think it is interesting in that regard. It is always a two-handed deal once there's kids in the equation. So I think resilience at work, sticking at it, and having support on the home front. Those would be the two things I would say. I was lucky to have a bit of both.
And Fiona, FBD had very strong financial returns earlier this year, but the whole agri-insurance, farm insurance market is becoming more competitive. We had the AXA Farm Insurance launched their farm division as well recently. How are you navigating through that space, and what targets are FBD looking at the moment for future goals?
So, it's only a very short time since FBD. 3 years ago when I came in, FBD was in a lot of difficulty around insurance and losses, and so memories are short. And of course, everybody thinks everybody else's business looks good. So we do have new competitors in our space. Competition is good, keeps us on our toes. It means we're taking nothing for granted around our customers. But I think in the main, we will be defending strongly. We're very proud of the fact that we are a farm insurer, and we are started by farmers and for farmers. And that's still very much all the way through everything that we do. So we will defend strongly the patch that we have, and we would be very confident that our policy cover is the strongest in the market, and that we represent the gold standard that others like to compete with. So Not loving the competition, but sure, it keeps us on our toes, and we are heavily competed, as I say, and that does stop us from taking any of our relationships with our customers for granted, and that can only be a good thing.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us, Fiona.